Welcome, my dear guests, to the captivating expanses of my story. Chapter 21, 2219. Rita Griffin stood in front of the circular lectern in the Imperial Senate. Her red hair shone in the warm light of the crystal chandeliers, and the notes on her datapad reflected the light as she reviewed the key points of the research proposal. Theoretical models of the star classes urgently need to be compared with reality. Her voice echoed through the high hall. Our calculations are based on centuries-old data from Earth. The stars in our sector show deviations that we cannot explain. Senator Voss leaned forward in his seat. And what good does this academic gimmick do us? His voice dripped with condescension. While the Almorans are rearing, you want to observe stars. Our colony's energy production depends on our understanding of the stars. Rita tapped her datapad. A hologram appeared above the console, a pulsating red giant with huge plasma bursts. The efficiency of our solar collectors could be increased by 30%. Nadine Heimber rose from her seat, her gaunt figure looming over the other senators like a memorial. Her white robe rustled as she spread her arms. The Helix teaches us all about the stars. The Holy Scriptures reveal their true nature. Why do we need new theories when the truth is already written in the gene charts? Do you know why star in the Wayalities system is developing these mysterious plasma vortices? Rita projected another hologram. The swirling plasma storms danced in hypnotic patterns above the senators' heads. Or why do the neutron stars in the Apsu cluster have a completely different rotation period than our models predict? The Holy Scriptures are silent on this. Myra Gupta nodded in agreement, her fingers drumming on the polished wooden table. The economic benefits of a better understanding to stars should not be underestimated. Think of the energy supply for our colonies, the navigational safety of our merchant fleets. The research fleet has more important tasks, Paulina Romero interjected. Uniform buttons flashed in the light of the holograms. The Almorans are upgrading. We can't. The EK Ibn Battuta is perfectly equipped for this mission. Rita interrupted sharply, her red hair lit up like a wreath of flame around her head. With the new high-precision sensors, we can take measurements that our ancestors could only dream of. The ship was designed precisely for such. Impreatrix Sevia Heimber raised her hand. The golden rings on her fingers sparkled in the light of the holograms. Immediately, the discussions fell silent, as if someone had flipped a switch. The exploration of our stars is of the utmost importance to the Empire. She fixed Senator Voss with her penetrating gaze, her blue eyes boring into his. Not only for energy production, but also for the navigation of our fleets. The future of our expansion depends on it. But the sacred scriptures... Nadine began, her voice shaking with suppressed protest. The motion is approved. Sevia's voice cut through the room like a knife made of ice, allowing no dissent. The Imperatrix straightened to her full height. The research fleet will systematically study the stars in our sector. The EK Ibn Battuta will be the spearhead. Rita exhaled with relief. Her fingers relaxed around the datapad, leaving moist imprints on the cool glass. A slight smile played around her lips. At last they would be able to fathom the secrets of the stars and solve the riddles that had fascinated her since childhood. Rita Griffin stood in front of the Imperial Senate, her red hair shining in the glow of the holograms. Her white lab coat crackled with every movement. Projections of air-conditioned cities floated above the podium, casting bluish shadows on the hall's polished marble columns. Technology will not only improve our existing metropolitan areas, it will open up completely new living spaces. Her fingers danced across the control panel, precise and unerring. The images switched to multi-story greenhouses and vertical gardens that ran through the urban landscape like green arteries. Senator Voss snorted, his voice echoing off the high ceilings. Another costly experiment with no tangible benefit. His fingers drummed impatiently on the arm of his chair. On the contrary, Rita adjusted her horn-rimmed glasses and pointed to diagrams with population forecasts. Figures and graphs were reflected in the lenses. Optimized climate control makes it possible to double the population density while increasing the quality of life. Myra Gupta nodded in agreement, her round face radiating confidence. The economic benefits are obvious. She folded her hands over her bright turquoise robe. The debate was interrupted when one of Admiral Romero's aides entered the room. His boots echoed on the marble floor. Romero's gray eyes narrowed as she read the report. Her uniform stretched across her broad shoulders as she crumpled the document. The Almorans are increasing their presence on our borders. We need those resources for the fleet. Her voice cut through the tense atmosphere like a knife. The colonization of 34 Citiatia is absolute priority. Nadine Heimber contradicted. Her white robe rustled as she stood up. The hologram's light made her ascetic features stand out even more sharply. A Cascadian world offers unique opportunities for genetic adaptation. Her hand stroked the sacred symbol on her necklace. Impreatrix Sevia Heimber looked at the upset faces of her senators. Her piercing blue eyes traveled from one to the other as her fingers clutched the edge of the armrest. The challenges are complex. We need both internal strength and external protection. 2 new corvettes are not enough, Romero urged. Her knuckles turned white as she leaned on the podium. The Almoran are one of many threats. Rita interrupted. Her horn-rimmed glasses flashed in the light of the holograms. Without technological progress, we will fall behind. Her fingers tapped nervously against the data. The Space Navy embodies our tradition of strength. Paulina countered. The projections reflected in her eyes, casting blue shadows on her angular face. Without them, there are no colonies to improve. Space uniform rustled as she crossed her arms. Myra rose to her feet. Her turquoise robe rustled softly. A compromise is possible. Climate control will increase the efficiency of our shipyards. She smoothed a fold of her robe as she said, the genetic purity of our colonists is paramount. Nadine insisted. The sacred symbol on her necklace swung with each of her sharp gestures. Her gray hair shimmered in the dim light of the Senate. Enough. Sevia's voice cut through the tumult like a laser through steel. The Imperatrix straightened to her full height. We will move forward with all 3 projects. The Space Marine tradition will be established. The colonization of 34 Ctii will begin as planned, and the climate program will be implemented. Her magnificent robe shone in the glow of the holograms. Silence descended over the Senate like a heavy blanket. Rita observed her colleagues' closed expressions. Unconsciously, her fingers played with the hem of her lab coat. No one dared object, but the tension vibrated in the air like an electric field. Andrea Saul was looking at the exploration probe's image of the surface of HFY when it discovered a huge cave opening with bizarre crystal formations glittering in the light of her lamp. The barren moon orbited a dying star, its faint light barely reaching the surface. The probe slid deeper into the cave labyrinth. On the bridge of the EK Ibn Andrea and her crew watched the incoming images spellbound. The walls pulsed in a faint bioluminescent blue. Fascinating. The crystal formations seemed to interact with the life forms. Dr. Stern murmured as his fingers flew over the sensor data. The temperature is a constant 40 degrees Celsius. A vast underground lake appeared on the main screen. The surface rippled as translucent serpentine creatures slithered through. Their bodies pulsed in the same rhythm as the glowing walls. The sensors are showing intense bioelectric activity, Marcus Chen reported, adjusting the sensitivity of the scanners. These creatures communicate via electrical fields. The patterns resemble neural net. Tanya Rodriguez bent over her console, her fingers flying over the controls. The crystals act as a kind of natural nervous system. They conduct the signals through the entire cave network. The transmission rate exceeds our measuring device. The probe plunged deeper into the darkness. Amoeba-like organisms move between the phosphorescent crystals, absorbing the bluish glow and converting it into energy pulses. Bioluminescent stalactites hung from the vaulted ceiling like glowing tentacles, their tips pulsating to the rhythm of the bioelectric fields. More life forms at 2 kilometers deep. Lieutenant Garcia reported from the navigation console. The activity is increasing exponentially. The density of crystal formations is tripling. The camera panned to an extensive colony of strange mushroom-like formations. Their translucent domes shimmered in shades of blue and oscillated in time with the electric fields. Swarms of small jellyfish-like creatures floated between them, their tentacles stretched out like fine sensors. "The biochemistry is unique," said Dr. Stern. His voice trembled with excitement as he studied the analysis data. They use the geothermal energy of the crystals as a food source, a completely autonomous ecosystem independent of photosynthesis. The probe passed a cluster of pulsating columns. Inside them, crystalline structures moved like blood in veins. The blue glow condensed into a hypnotic rhythm. The entire cave is a single superorganism, Andrea whispered, leaning closer to the screen. The various life forms merged before her eyes into a surreal underwater landscape of pulsating light and flowing movement. The crystalline structures formed a widely ramified network through which bioelectric signals flowed like thoughts. Temperature rising to 60 degrees, warned Lieutenant Tanaka from the sensor module, approaching a geothermal source. The probe's hull is approaching stress limits. The camera panned to a huge vent from which sulfurous gases rose in swirling streams. Massive crystal formations in shimmering shades of blue and purple had formed around the jagged opening. Between them floated dense swarms of tiny, bioluminescent organisms that seemed to dance in a complex ballet. "Scan everything." Andrea ordered and activated additional recording modules. This is a scientific gold mine. Dr. Stern focuses especially on the symbiosis between the crystals and the life forms. The sensor data poured in a never-ending flood as the probe systematically mapped the alien ecosystem. It's a hidden world with no sun, no eyes, but full of vibrant life and complex relationships between species. A world that had adapted perfectly over millions of years to the extremes of eternal darkness and scorching heat. Alexei Volkov stood at the vantage point above the Ekaterinburg basin and watched the excavators eating their way through the moors. The cold wind tugged at his heavy coat while the metallic smell of churned-up peat soil hung in the air. 3 months ago, he had been standing here alone. Now there was hustle and bustle everywhere. The rhythmic roar of the machines echoed off the rock faces. "The drainage trenches in the western sector are finished, Baron." Elena Petrova stepped up beside him. Her boots were smeared with grey mud, and her uniform jacket was covered in dark water stains. "The first settlers can move in 2 weeks. The soil measurements show optimal values." Alexei nodded silently. The responsibility for all these people weighed heavily on his shoulders. As a simple technician, he had only operated machines. Now, the fate of an entire colony depended on his fingers drummed nervously against the railing of the viewing platform. The Gene Monastery is also making good progress. Elena pointed to the massive foundation at the foot of the Ural Mountains, where polished granite blocks were piling up. Dozens of workers swarmed around the huge stone pillars like ants, while antigrav platforms brought in more building materials. Sister Magdalena is very pleased with the situation. The morning sun will fall perfectly on the main altar. The Helix deserves a worthy place here. Alexei rubbed his tired eyes as the smell of molten metal wafted over from the welding work on the monastery. The last few weeks had hardly allowed him any sleep, the responsibility gnawing at his nerves. "We have to preserve our spiritual roots, even if we are breaking new ground. The church gives people stability in this strange environment." A loud crash made them cringe. One of the large pumps had drained another section, bogged the hydraulic cylinders groaning under the load. Brackish water flowed out through the channels, exposing fertile soil. The musty smell of millennia rose from the churned-up earth. The botanists say the soil is perfect for crops. Elena scrolled through a data pad, the bluish projection casting dancing shadows on her face. As soon as the ecosystem is stabilized, we can start sowing. The soil samples show a high level of minerals. Alexei stepped to the edge of the viewing platform, the metal grid vibrating under his footsteps. The mysterious energy shield shimmered faintly on the horizon like a translucent curtain, a constant reminder of the mysteries of this world. His discovery had earned him the title of nobility, a burden heavier than his old technician's overalls. Now, he had to prove that he deserved it. We need more accommodation for the workers. He pointed to an open area near the landing zone, where the marker drones had already drawn fluorescent light. Of barracks set up there, at least 20 units with thermal protection. And reinforce the teams on the western flank. The moors there must be dry before winter. The meteorologists are forecasting early frosts. Will do, Baron. Elena made notes on her datapad, her fingers flying over the holographic keyboard. Should I also speed up the delivery of materials for the monastery? The anti-grav platforms are ready. Sister Magdalena is already waiting impatiently for her first novices. Alexia watched as the sun sank behind the mountains, casting long shadows over the changing land. The headlights of the work robots came to life one by one, cutting through the falling twilight with a bluish light. This world will be home to all believers and pioneers alike. The first step into a new era for Kasach. The mighty crystal chandelier cast its colorful light onto the massive marble columns of the Imperial Senate as the senators settled into their red velvet-covered seats. The holographic displays flickered with data on the various alien threats surrounding the Empire of Kasach. The smell of freshly polished wood and old leather hung in the air. Johanna Fritsch stood upright before the semicircular podium, her dark blue diplomatic uniform immaculately pressed. The silver badge of the Special Commission for First Contacts gleamed on her chest. Her fingers stroked the cool metal of the podium as she scrutinized the tense faces of the assembled dignitaries. The heavy air in the hall vibrated with unspoken questions. Honorable senators, her voice echoed through the hall. The Aleph signals in the Luan Yundi system show patterns that indicate a highly advanced form of communication. I will personally travel there to study these signals at their source. The frequency analyses show recurring sequences that cannot be of natural origin. Behind her, the holographic projections moved, showing pulsating waveforms of the mysterious alien signals. The bluish light of the displays was reflected in the polished marble floors and cast ghostly shadows on the high walls of the Senate. The mathematical precision of the patterns hypnotized those present. Nadine Heimber leaned forward in her Senate seat, her traditional helix robe rustling. Her grey eyes fixed Johanna with the intensity of an inquisitor. How do you intend to ensure this journey does not lead to another confrontation? The genetic purity of our people is at stake. Through careful preparation and patient observation, Johanna replied. Her hands rested firmly on the desk, her knuckles protruding white. We must understand before we can be understood. The signals carry a message, peaceful or hostile, that could determine the fate of our empire. Hannah Hussein stood up at the other end of the hall, her green diplomatic robes contrasting with the red senatorial robes. Exhaustion etched her. Unfortunately, our efforts to decipher the Gamma language have been unsuccessful. Their communication patterns seem to contradict any known linguistic structure. The holographic displays switched to complex language analysis of Gamma communication. Confusing patterns of light and shadow danced across the Senate's walls. Imperatrix Sevia Heimber watched the discussion from her elevated throne, her golden crown glittering in the chandelier light. Her fingers drummed thoughtfully on the polished armrest of throne chair. Sitting next to one of the high-arched windows through which the morning light streamed, Rita Griffin hastily made notes on her datapad. The reflections of the hollow projections were mirrored in the lenses of her glasses. "Show us the last recorded gamma signals," Myra Gupta demanded from her seat in the front row. Hannah Hussein stepped up to the podium and activated the hologram controls. Her hands moved precisely over the shimmering surface, and the light from the projections cast blue shadows on her exhausted face. The first shot filled the hall with a low, vibrating hum. Clicking sounds mingled with melodic tones reminiscent of whale song. This was followed by sharp, metallic sounds that rapidly overlapped each other. The second part of the recording produced a sequence of noises that sounded like crystalline tinkling. The sounds floated through the room at different heights, forming patterns that defied any known linguistic structure. Senator Voss pressed his hands over his ears as a particularly penetrating sound rang out. Other senators shifted uneasily in their seats. Strange sounds seemed to make the air itself fire. Johanna's eyes widened as a new sequence began, an interplay of low resonances and high-singing tones. Her years of linguistic experience had not prepared her for this form of communication. Hannah stopped the recording and pointed at the spinning hologram of sound waves. "These phonemes don't follow any pattern. We know the gamma are using frequencies outside our normal hearing range. What we hear is only a fraction of their communication." The senators stared spellbound at the complex wave patterns in front of them. Their strangeness had a disturbing beauty that captivated everyone in the room. Mariana Martin stood on the bridge of the EK equinox and looked at the holographic projection of the Lardon system. Blue light flickered across her face as the three-dimensional display rotated before her. The sensor data showed a pulsing anomaly at the system's edge, a shimmering energy ribbon winding through space like a snake. The bridge was bathed in a subdued red light, punctuated by the green and blue glow of the emergency system. The steady hum of the life support systems mingled with the quiet beeping of the control panels and the rhythmic clicking of the atmosphere regulator. Officers sat at the workstations in their navy blue uniforms, their concentrated faces illuminated by the glow of their displays and the pulsating holograms. Sensors show massive gravitational fluctuations in the target area, reported Erica Bergman from the science station. Her fingers danced across the holographic controls as data cascaded across her screen. The values exceed those of the surrounding asteroid field by a factor of 10. Such an energy pattern, completely abnormal for this region. Mariana brushed an unruly strand of hair from her face as her eyes analyzed the incoming data streams. The metallic taste of recycled air lingered on her tongue, mixed with the moment's tension. "Lieutenant Swan, bring us to measuring distance. Minimum 500,000 kilometers. Activate the gravity dampers to the maximum." "Yeah, Commander." Heinke Schwan adjusted the thrusters with precise movements of his practiced hands. The slight vibration under Mariana's feet intensified to a low hum as the Equinox changed its position in space. The stars on the main screen shifted imperceptibly. The anomaly pulsed on the main screen like an alien heart. Mariana Martin watched the hypnotic movements of the energy bands winding through space. A faint tingling sensation ran over her skin. Even at this distance, the phenomenon seemed to have a physical presence. "Mapping complete," Dr. Bregman reported. Her voice sounded muffled in the quiet atmosphere of the bridge. "The data shows an extension of 2,000 kilometers. The energy values follow a pattern I've never seen. The red emergency light was reflected in the displays, casting dancing shadows on the walls. The massive asteroid hovered like a dark sentinel before the glowing ribbon. Its jagged surface showed traces of ancient impacts, deep craters and jagged ridges that shimmered in unreal colors in the light of the anomaly. The asteroid's surface temperature is 100 degrees above normal," reported Lieutenant Schwan from the navigation console. His fingers glided over the controls. "The radiation from the anomaly has altered the mineral structure. The entire boulder as if transformed. Mariana sensed the tension in her crew. They all wanted to find out more about this mystery and wanted to give in to the temptation to fly closer. But their orders were clear. Map and move on. The EK Equinox was a research vessel, but not a spearhead into the unknown. Initiate course calculation for the next waypoint. Mariana ordered. The hum of the engines changed its tone as the Equinox slowly moved away from the asteroid. The jagged mass of the celestial body seemed to pulsate in the light of the anomaly. A force beyond human understanding now touched ancient rocks that had been drifting through the darkness for eons. The rock itself seemed to want to tell a story. Dr. Bergman sighed softly at her station. All this data, and we can't even analyze it ourselves. The fingers stroked the sensor displays almost tenderly. The energy signatures are fascinating, like a cosmic heart. Mariana understood her science officer's frustration. The EK Equinox was like a scout that only sketched the outlines of great discoveries, while others would explore the details. She looked at the shimmering ribbon of the anomaly one last time before giving the order for final departure. Chief Engineer Mikhail Petrov kept an eye on the colony ship's progress through the big panoramic windows of the shipyard control center. The sleek, cylindrical shape of the hull shone brightly under the glare of the shipyard's work lights. Hundreds of maintenance drones and construction robots buzzed around the 1.2-kilometer-long behemoth like a swarm of metallic insects. We've successfully integrated the new stasis modules from the SIDS project, Mikhail said, running a hand over his graying beard as he scanned system values. The hologram displays in front of him showed detailed diagrams of the enhanced life support systems with highlighted energy conduits and biochemical cycles. Almar Kazan was there too, his state-of-the-art TX-900 camera, drone hovering silently over their heads. The red recording light reflected in the windows and cast a faint glow on the polished metal surfaces of the control consoles. So the experience from Scifinovel was valuable, Almar asked, adjusting his microphone as his fingers glided routinely over the built-in mixer. Absolutely. We've reinforced the shields against cosmic radiation and improved the hydroponic gardens. We've optimized all of that. Mikhail pointed to different parts of the ship, his hands marked by the scars of his work, tracing precise movements in the air. But the best part is the new terraforming modules, which were developed based on findings from both colonies. The camera smoothly shifted to a high-resolution hologram of 34 Ceti. The planet shimmered in a rich blue-green, with reddish desert areas and snow-covered polar caps mixed in. Thin bands of clouds stretched across the surface like spun silk, while atmospheric currents formed complex patterns in the stratosphere. Our analysis shows perfect conditions, Mikhail explained, activating more data layers in the hologram. It's got 19 oxygen in the atmosphere, lots of fresh water, and fertile soil in the equatorial zones. The tectonic activity is just right for geothermal energy production. Almar nodded and had his camera drone pan across the massive docking bay, where utility robots crawled like metal ants between the supply lines. And what about the crystalline formations we discovered in the southern plateaus? They look a bit like SIDS structures. It's interesting, isn't it? Mikhail projected a new map and zoomed in on a southern hemisphere section. It looks like these natural structures collect sunlight and channel it into the deeper layers of the ground. They'd be ideal for solar power plants. The crystals boost solar radiation by 3 times the original amount. The two men observed as another module was affixed to the colony ship's hull. Sparks flew through the vacuum like a shower of artificial stars. Blue Jam is going to be more than just another colony, Mikhail said quietly. With its rich mineral deposits, ideal location for trade, and unique geological formation, it could become a jewel of the Empire. Almar's camera drone took a closer look at the impressive ship. The polished surfaces glistened like a promise of a bright future. This is the first potential landing zone, showing a detailed terrain scan of the planet over the planetary hologram. There was a wide valley between gently rising hills covered in shimmering bluish vegetation. The plain is big enough for an expanding colony. He continued, the crystalline formations on the southern edge could be a natural energy source. But our drones have found large herds of six-legged herbivores that regularly migrate through the valley. Alma was intrigued by the images of the strange creatures. The creatures' scaly skin shimmered in the sunlight, giving them a metallic look. Second option is in the eastern plateaus. The hologram then showed a plateau surrounded by towering cliffs. The high ground offers significant strategic advantages and protection from flooding during the rainy season. The area is also home to various medicinal plants, which can be found in the dense vegetation. The camera drone focused on some bright purple plants growing between the rocks. The only downside is that the strong high-altitude winds would make construction difficult, and the local predator population is unusually territorial. And here's another option to consider. Mikhail switched to a coastal area with lots of beaches and islands in the sea. Access to the sea means fishing and aquaculture. The bay offers natural protection from storms. The native fauna is mainly limited to small creatures. Alma studied the underwater footage of floating jellyfish-like creatures. What are the disadvantages? Hey, I would be happy if you could give my video a like, leave a comment, and subscribe to my